Please proceed.
Mr. Chairman, at your pleasure, I did receive correspondence from staff regarding the major maintenance projects in excess of 250,000. They range from 250 to 3 million, totaling 19.6, and those are from the 2017 and 2019 appropriations. But we'll follow up with a list.
Okay, and so I think it'd be useful if you could just send us the list or provide it to Don and we'll recirculate it so we get a breakdown. Okay,
Mr. Chairman, absolutely.
thank you. All right, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, next item is Barrett Building, Pacific Building, and Unicover Building security improvements through the
Page number?
department.
Page
Page 23.
23.
150,000. This is a request through A&I
Okay,
in support of State Parks and Cultural Resources, adding key cards, glass breakage sensors, door alarms, panic buttons, and so on. $150,000 governor's recommendation from SIPA in lieu of general funds.
so I'm curious why this would be a general funds quest and not part of the state parks. Kitty?
Mr. Chairman, A&I is responsible for managing the facilities that each of the agencies are in. It's similar to A&I providing card access at the Hirschler building for the individual agencies. It really is a building need.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman,
go ahead.
it's predicated on the statutory flexibility for the special revenue. So if it applies to a park, then we'd make it special revenue. If it applies to the museum, we seek general fund. They seek general fund. We make it SIPA.
Okay, fair enough. Questions? Go ahead. Please proceed.
Mr. Chairman, next item, page 27, Hirschler Building sound masking system. The sound masking system is a standard system that's usually provided in office buildings that have open office space with lots of cubicles and no walls between them. This was not included in the project, but Hirschler Building did have one before the project that wasn't replaced. It is a need, about $35,000 per floor for a total of $280,000.
So I've got quite a few questions about this because I'd like to see what it is that they're putting up, what this is going to look like, how it's going to break up the format of those floors. Those, they were specifically designed to be open. And so if this is going to counteract that, I mean, in other words, do you have a mock-up? Can we see what it looks like or what before we move forward with it?
Mr. Chairman, absolutely. Know that it's a hidden system. It's generally speakers that are placed above the ceiling. They do hope to purchase systems that have also a public address system in them. So there might be some speakers that are surface mounted flush in the ceiling tiles, but essentially it will not affect the architecture of the building at all. It just improves the office environment so that speech is not intelligible, 2 and 3 cubicles away. So you can conduct your own phone calls and work in a level of peace. They call it white noise or pink noise.
So I guess I don't quite understand what it is. If you're installing speakers.
It's an acoustic treatment system that provides background noise so that I wouldn't be able to overhear conversations that are a few feet away that disrupt my work.
Do we have any other buildings where this already exists?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not aware of any, the health department did have those systems in place in their lease space. And again, the Hirschler building did have them before. And essentially it was a speaker that was hidden above the ceiling and you really didn't realize it was on and providing background noise until it shut off.
Okay, further questions? I wonder if we could see an example of it or if you can get a mock-up of some sort. I mean, we don't know if it's going to work. We don't know. It's just kind of thrown out there or what it'll look like, if it will really function in that particular format. I don't know. Have you spoken with the folks that do this and asked them to come look at the building and do an assessment where are we at in that process?
Mr. Chairman, I do believe ANI has been involved in those conversations, and I think the Department of Education might have, gone out and got some initial pricing. Individual agencies were making an effort on their own, and now ANI is, making an effort to, in the management of the building, making it one uniform system that can also have safety implications or helpful with the public address system. But certainly we can get more information.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Please.
maybe the consultants can look at this room and tell us if pink noise might hold down some of the reverberation, improve our acoustics.
I've got a couple ideas for that. All right, go ahead. Next.
Mr. Chairman, the next is a Hathaway 4th floor, level 3 design and construction in page 31.
So just update us on the Hathaway. How much have we spent? How far along are we on the remodel?
Mr. Chairman, the Hathaway building was built in 1975. The 5th floor was renovated when the lab facility was built at a cost of about $5 million. As part of that renovation, a new air handling unit that is meant to service all units, all floors, eventually when each floor is able to be renovated, was purchased and installed. And the master plan is to renovate 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. A little bit of floor 1 has also been renovated, but it hasn't tied into that new air handling system and HVAC. But essentially everything in the Hathaway building on 4, 3, and 2 is original to 1975, maybe even the carpet in very many suites. It has old outdated lighting and also a very inefficient floor plan. It has kind of a double racetrack that really reduces the net to gross space. The 5th floor was renovated in a way that made it a lot more useful. We took several agencies out of lease space, put them in the 5th floor of the Hathaway building. This is just a continuation of that.
So on the master plan, what's the overall cost?
Mr. Chairman, 5.362 million is the allotted amount
For the entire
for
building.
the entire building. Well, it depends on the schedule.
But,
If
if it's roughly 5 to 6
per
million a
floor, Mr. Chairman, we're talking about 15 million, 16 more.
How much was it cost to demolish it?
Mr. Chairman, less than that.
No, less than that.
But there is a lot of state agencies that would need to find homes, and temporary space, lease space is not inexpensive.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman,
please go ahead.
was it 15 million on top of the 5 million here? Or was it 15 million total?
Mr. Chairman, there are 3 floors that need an entire renovation, and 1st floor needs a partial renovation.
So that would be
5, and a little more,
Right,
and plus inflation over time, depending on.
correct.
So it's, I think it's 25 to 30 million. Is that the right?
Mr. Chairman, yes, rough math, yes.
And we've already spent about 5.
Mr. Chairman, yes.
Thanks.
Okay, next.
Mr. Chairman, next is an equipment pole barn at the Liquor Division warehouse site. This will provide, Mr. Chairman, page 35.
Okay,
An equipment pole barn at Liquor Division to house equipment for grounds and maintenance, and also for trades, filters, different supplies for the building. The estimated amount is $60,000. Governor recommends funding from SIPA in lieu of general funds.
so I'm curious about what's the size? Oh, it's 30 by 60. Okay, go ahead.
Are there any additional questions on the equipment pole barn? Mr. Chairman, moving to,
I'm sorry, by the way, I am curious why SIPA was used. Kevin, any particular reason, and you just don't want to use general funds?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we changed it from the general fund source to the SIPA, and largely we did that on all the projects, all the construction projects, with the exception where we have special revenue, federal funds, or private sources.
And that was in order to use up SIPA, basically.
Mr. Chairman, yes, ZIPA,
Okay,
there's zero balance in the SIPA.
We'll see. Okay, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, next item on page 39 is it's a parking lot expansion essentially to allow for snow removal. I would add that it may also add better capacity for when the facility is at full use. There are a couple of nice conference rooms out at that facility that when those are in use, there's not sufficient parking. And as such, the grounds and operations staff find it very difficult to be able to maintain snow removal operations. Usually in a parking lot, you'll have a few parking spaces you can sacrifice for snow removal, snow piling. But at that location, it is so tight, that's not possible.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
out of curiosity, this is an enterprise fund. Why is it not coming out of the state liquor division's budget?
Mr. Chairman, again, it is to help, it's for A&I to help maintain and support agency use of those facilities.
So I'm curious, when you go out to Liquor Commission, very, very seldom are more than half of the parking spaces used. So I'm curious about that, but I'm also curious about having asphalt as a base for snow, because asphalt deteriorates when it gets wet and breaks down. And so to have asphalt on the ground for snow
Yeah,
is counterintuitive.
Mr. Chairman, in hindsight, I certainly would reflect and say that we should never be this specific in this sort of ask. I mean, on other projects, sometimes we'll have a base bid for asphalt and also do concrete, and sometimes concrete is less expensive. And so it would certainly be evaluated at that time. I think this came forward just to match existing, what other adjacent pavements are. But it certainly wouldn't need to be asphalt.
Okay. Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
going back to the pole barn a couple pages previous, could you get back to us with, they mentioned putting in a gravel floor. Would you get back to us with what it would cost to put a concrete floor in that so that it was a finished facility?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Walters, absolutely.
Okay, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, next up on page 43 is Military Department Camp Guernsey 2022 new enlisted barracks transient training. This supports the military department's training efforts at Guernsey. And they have a similar one for the next item also, one for 22, one for 2023. Director Shope has asked that he be able to speak to this at his budget hearing. This is for spending authority of federal funds.
That's fine. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I'm going to take you back to the liquor warehouse. Just a question on, I mean, at the end of the day, does this, by whether you pave it or whether you pour a concrete pad for this, is this going to be tied into is the point of this to be tied into the drainage system of the parking lot so that as the snow melts, that it resolves the other problem, or is this just going to be off to the side? Or I'm just, at the end of the day, it's not just the snow, it's the drain, it's when it melts and where that goes. And so is the plan to tie this into the parking lot drainage so that it goes out to the storm sewer or wherever the drainage goes out there?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Perkins, yes, I believe so.
All right, thank you.
We hope so. Okay, please proceed.
Mr. Chairman, page 47 is the 2023 enlisted barracks for transient training with federal fund spending authority request. Mr. Chairman, next, page 51, Law Enforcement Academy expansion replacement of target systems and retaining walls at the outdoor firearms range in Douglas, Wyoming. The request is $952,000. Governor's recommendation is from SIPA in lieu of general fund. Moving along.
So was there a level 1, level 2?
Mr. Chairman, there was a level 1 developed, and I believe in coming forward with this request, they moved into level 2, but not necessarily formally. They worked with the same consultants that were on board.
Okay, could you just provide Don a copy of the level 1 report?
Mr. Chairman, absolutely.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, I think I lost my place. Mr. Chairman, facility, page 55, facility door locks and security system replacement upgrade at Douglas, Wyoming. Governor's recommendation is approval from SIPA for $364,000 in lieu of general funds.
Questions? Seeing none, please proceed.
Again, we'll provide that level 1 that will inform those. And also page 59, Law Enforcement Academy Long Gun Range Rebuild, $1.59 million recommended from SIPA in lieu of general fund.
Next.
Mr. Chairman, page 64, $4.1 million of spending authority from the special revenue for state parks and cultural resources, outdoor recreation, maintenance, health, safety.
Any questions? Seeing none, go ahead.
Page 67, $210,000 for Wyoming State Parks Priority 2, Wyoming Territorial Prison spending authorization. Recommended.
Okay, please proceed.
Page 71, Wyoming State Parks and Cultural Resources Priority 3, water related facilities spending authority for $300,000. Recommended approval by the governor.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Page 75, Wyoming State Parks and Cultural Resources Priority 4, Quebec 1 Missile Alert Facility spending authorization of $25,000. It's recommended approval by the governor. Page 79 is the Department of Fire Prevention and Electrical Safety, Riverton, Wyoming Fire Academy site improvements. This is an important improvement for fire training facilities for the state of Wyoming. The request is $1.356 million and has the governor's recommendation from SIPA in lieu of general fund.
So was there a level 1, level 2 on this?
Mr. Chairman, yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, page 83, Wyoming Boys School Facility Maintenance Storage Facility Demolition and Replacement. There are old buildings built in 1931 and 53 that need to be demolished. And a new 80 by 100 foot building for $330,000. Governor's approval from SIPA in lieu of general funds.
Please, Representative Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and maybe Director Schmidt or Mel, one of you can, isn't that the building? It was an old block building and we've got it reinforced with metal rods through the building because it's cracked and we're kind of holding that welding shop together. They use it for some storage as well too, but it's kind of one of the old historic buildings and am I thinking of the right one?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, it says it's a welding shop built in 1931 and a lawn shop. And
Okay, further questions? Please proceed.
Mr. Chairman, page 87, Community College Commission, Central Wyoming College Jackson Outreach Center. The overall request, 18.67 million and change. Governor recommends 10.335 and change from SIPA and 8.335 and change from other funds. You'll note that the 55-45 split on this appears to be unequal, but what essentially that does is it keeps a contingency on the state side for allocation as needed.
So with this particular building, where does the 45% come from? Is that from the,
Mr. Chairman, Dr. Dr. Cardwell is here and would like to speak to that.
go ahead, Sandy.
Mr. Chairman, I did not hear your question. I'm just having a little bit of a hard time hearing.
Yeah, I'm looking, what's the source of the 8.3 million? Where does it come, that special revenue or the other funds?
Oh, Mr. Chairman, yes, that is the portion that's going to come from the community college and their private revenue.
And is there more details? Is it coming from any folks in Teton County, or where are the private sources of funds? John, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I believe Mr. Nosey from CWC is also on
Yes, yes. He's on Zoom.
online.
Somebody.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, there is a note here that says provided by Teton County residents and philanthropy.
Can you say that again?
And philanthropy. So it sounds like there's a donor.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead. Senator Greer.
I can speak to that a little. We had, as you may remember, a couple of years ago, we had a $500,000 appropriation from this committee, which was matched with $1 million in fundraising. It was $1 million originally, then it got cut at the end to 500,000, but the $1 million was raised. So that was, that turned out for 1.5. We also had a spec ballot appropriation of that was voted on and passed and collected $4 million. In addition to that, there has been other philanthropic
Yes.
endeavors on this property. So we're quite confident that all the money on that side will be raised.
Okay, thank you.
That's
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, please.
Can I go back just for a minute to back to the boys' school, the storage building?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Suzanne, going back to the storage building, I mean, if I understand the narrative right, it's a 80 by 100 foot building. It's a storage building. And it's, what page is that one on? That's on.
Mr. Chairman, 83.
83, thank you. And so it's 8,000 square foot. It's 33,000 for level 3 in construction. That's $4 a square foot for a storage building when we already own the land. And it just seems really high for a storage building. That's my math. So.
Mr. Chairman, we can sure take a look at that and see what kind of construction methods are proposed, whether it's a block building or some other kind of construction.
Yeah, okay. I mean, there may be a reason for that, but I mean, the narrative would indicate that it's pretty much just a storage building. That's pretty expensive storage square footage. So especially when you already own the land. So thank you.
Mr. Chairman, we'll take a look.
Any comments, Cora?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, this is 2019 figures, and I do believe that they even tried to go out for bid and found out that it's potentially even a little bit more. So I do think there needs to be maybe an additional discussion about this particular request.
Do you have a recollection? Is it a block building? Is it insulated? Is it going to be used for anything other than storage?
Mr. Chairman, I do not know what kind of building, but yes, it will be primarily used for storage. We'll store a bus and it'll store a lot of lawn equipment and mechanical equipment.
What about a pole barn?
Mr. Chairman, we will not be picky.
Mr. Chairman, it's possible that since including that is demolishing and replacing two existing buildings. So if there's asbestos, there's some issue in those buildings, then that may make some sense. But but anyway, if you can get back to us some more details on that, just to make sure. Thank you. I appreciate
Yes.
it.
Thank you.
Okay, further questions? Go ahead, proceed.
Mr. Chairman, taking a step back, at your pleasure, perhaps we should allow Dr. Caldwell to make some opening comments for the community colleges.
We would love to hear an opening comment.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I am Dr. Sandy Caldwell, Executive Director of the Community College Commission. I also have with me our Chief Fiscal Officer, Mr. Larry Buckles. And I do want to share, we do have presidents and or their designee on Zoom. We do have interim president Lisa Watson from Northwest College. Dr. Tyndall could not be here today because he does have a Fremont County Commission meeting, and his vice president, Willie Nosip, I do believe is on from Central Wyoming College. Dr. Kim Dale from Western Wyoming Community College is also online. Dr. Walt Tribely from Northern Wyoming Community College District could not be online today. He does have a meeting with the Campbell County Commission today regarding the transition of Gillette Community College District. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I just want to share that most of these projects are ones you have seen before. And those numbers that are assigned to these, to each one of these projects are in fact the ones that you had included in the 2021 House Bill 2121. The exception to that is the Western Wyoming Community College Nursing facility. I just wanted to mention this one because you actually did see this one last year. But Dr. Dale and the Western Board opted to defer that project. It was a prioritized project, but following their nursing accreditation, they realized that they really needed to take a stronger look at this and then conducted a level 2 self-study that did in fact bring forward a stronger project. So I did want to mention that these projects are in fact, some of you seen for 3 years, for example, the CWC project. I also wanted to mention that in the bill from 2021 that you did move forward, there was the 12 million allocated. We wanted to make sure that you knew how that was spent. That was in fact the majority, 10 million of that did go to Laramie County Community College for their recreation and athletic complex. We had met with the 4 presidents who were potential for that project. And they all agreed that that Laramie County was ready to package that project and move forward. The balance of the 2 million was then distributed to the other 3 colleges to help them move forward on their level 3 design so that coming before you, things could move very quickly if you were willing to move those projects forward. So that lets you know how we've been able to actually move a project on based on your allocation from last year, and also so that those projects could move forward. I did also want to just mention that the priorities that are listed here are the priority order that the commission approved at its June 10th meeting. The colleges did not bring any additional projects forward. They knew that focus really needed to be on what was in front of you now to make sure that the college could move forward. We do have that single page of the recommendations and prioritization from the commission that joint appropriation strongly encouraged us to put into place, and we did. And I will say it has helped a lot with communication. We appreciate that. And then with that, I just want to remind you that the prioritization process, all the projects you see before you did move forward in that process. That is a 13 metric model that is based in the statewide college system strategic plan and the fact that the colleges must have by statute a facilities master plan every 5 years. So they are brought forward in that process. So I wanted to let you know that. So really, in short, what you have was Central Wyoming College on pages 86 through 89, Northwest College for their Student Center, pages 90 through 94, Western Wyoming Community College Nursing Project are pages 95 through 98. In the Northern Wyoming Community College District, that is their Center for Applied Technology and Applied Science, sometimes called the tech facility. That's on pages 99 through 102. And Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, the presidents or their designees are here to provide any comments. But we also recognize that these projects have been before you for numerous years. And the amounts that are listed are in fact, with the exception of the Western project that came from its level 2, are the ones that you included in the bill in the 2021 session. So with that, we're happy to have them answer any questions. We can go into any more detail, but we also recognize these are not new for you. And lastly, I would like to say Ms. Erin Taylor could not be here today. She wanted me to express that. I visited with her this morning. She is very ill and does not have a voice. So she is also not on Zoom, and she just wanted me to share that with you. So with that, I'm happy to answer any question. I'm sure the presidents or their designees are as well, with the exception of Dr. Tribely from Northern. We'll do our best to cover that should you have in-depth questions.
Okay. Any questions for Sandy?
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Stitt.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Commissioner Caldwell, thank you so much for that. I totally support Western Wyoming Community College. I'm a big booster of it. I served on the Board of Trustees there a long time ago, really believe in the community college mission. With respect to the nursing facility, I think we all agree that the existing space for the nursing program is too small. So we need space, got that. However, my question is whether in the study, whether it was considered to use some existing space that's already there. So for example, 11 years ago, the college spent $4.5 million to buy what was then a brand new hotel down the street. So the college owns this hotel, and right now it's vacant. I don't think it's being used for any purpose right now. In addition, the city of Rock Springs owns a historic building that the SLIB board has given $3.5 million to renovate, but the city has no stated purpose for how it's going to use that 17,000 square feet. So my question is this: has the college considered, has the commission considered using existing spaces that might cost less than $10 million to renovate and repurpose?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman and Representative Stith, part of that conversation was born out of the accreditation study, as you referenced, and was a part of the consideration of the level 2. I know that the adjacency for the students was an important part of the nursing program, and actually also the allied health. So that facility is really a nursing facility and the medical science, the health sciences facility as well, to allow for multiple uses of that space. But to more directly answer your question, Dr. Dale is online, and being the president, she would know those conversations directly with her board. So if I may, I would like to turn that over to Dr. Dale.
Mr. Chairman, no, she is not online.
They were having some, oh, I just got a text message. Let me tell you what that says. They were concerned that they had been kicked off. She just said the link changed. How do we get access to speak? Ms. Vaughn, help me. What can I do for the presidents?
Looking through the YouTube and the Zoom feed that we had this morning, none of the presidents have actually signed into Zoom. They might be following it through YouTube. If they'd like to go ahead and join the meeting, they need to click on the testify link. It might be gone off of this week, but it's the same link that we are using every single week. So if they click next week's link, they will still be able to get into today's meeting. They shouldn't have any difficulties.
Mr. Chairman, I had them on, and Dr. Dale just sent me a message that says that she is in. Do you not see her?
If she's in another meeting. Because the only person that we have from the colleges is Central Wyoming College, which you've already addressed. We don't have any of the presidents, no.
Okay, I'm working as fast as I can.
No, and Mr. Chairman, I can take my answer offline to that, but that's just a concern that I've got.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to follow up on that, Dr. Caldwell, because we've actually asked when this came up before us a couple of years ago, we've asked the same question. We've never got a response back on what other options are available in the community. In addition, I think there's some K-12 schools that are, those buildings are closed down that they're maybe usable space as well. And then the other challenge we have is you just commented on, well, this is not just nursing space, this is clinical, there's some other stuff to that. But as I read through the narrative, none of that's there. Okay. And so when we're making those decisions, we're making the decisions based on what has been in that narrative repeatedly, which does not include what you just said. And so I really would appreciate it if we could, because we really have asked that repeatedly and just have not got any kind of answer on, we've looked at this space, this place, the money we put in downtown Rock Springs to renovate that. So we'd really appreciate, before we make decisions on those points, please.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, I will ask Dr. Dale to give us a little bit more clarification on how the board did and in fact decide. I do want to clarify my comments, however, because I think that is incumbent on me to do so. This is definitely an outcome of the nursing facility and the nursing accreditation. I want to make that clear. The colleges, all of the colleges work very hard to make sure that they get the most efficient use of any space available. So there is no doubt that this is related to the nursing facility, but also the institution wants to make sure that it is having the best and highest use of any facility that they do have. So creating co-adjacencies. That was certainly an error on my part. And I see Dr. Dale is on, and I can please turn that over to her, Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Please proceed, Dr. Dale.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm very sorry that I biffed on that a little bit, but thank you for the time. And Representative Stiff, thank you for your questions. And Representative Larson, thank you for your questions as well. So before we started the level 2 study, we had to obviously, as administration, have approval from our Board of Trustees. So we did some preliminary work about some vacant buildings that were in fact to be considered, but to help narrow down the field for the level 2 study. And so the first security building that's being mentioned in downtown Rock Springs was something that we took a preliminary look at and decided that this would best be served if Western could expand maybe a different type of program in that space, maybe something that was more classroom oriented and computer oriented, since the development of this nursing lab space and health science space is very technical and very large. The space is going to be very large. Like Dr. Caldwell spoke of, we're looking at some efficiencies in gathering our paramedicine program and phlebotomy and CNA together. So we also ruled out the residence hall. That building is vacant this year for efficiency purposes, but we have plans for that. Our Board of Trustees has been very protective about that space, wanting to keep it on hand for expansion of enrollment and new program development. And in fact, that's going to serve us well because of our new power line technology program and fiber optics technology. We're looking at maybe some a learning community for manufacturing and industrial technology in that space. So that is something that the trustees were looking at as well. So the level 2 study actually did a deep dive into the Green River Center. That was something that we discussed with the Joint Appropriations Committee a couple of years ago, is let's step back and take a look at what that site might look like. And it was deemed that it was not going to be large enough and or efficient from a cost perspective. And then we also took a look at a vacant hospital space in downtown Rock Springs, and that too, with renovation and the needs for this program, actually the space was excessive and was not deemed to be as efficient and effective. And I would say one other thing, if I may, and that is that there is a lot to be said for the adjacency of this facility on the site at our Rock Springs campus. Our accreditors are very keen on seeing that our students have direct access to support services such as tutoring, even childcare. The average age of our nursing student is right around 30, 32 years old. They have families, and then access to their other professors as well. So an anatomy and physiology professor would not be housed anywhere else other than on the Rock Springs campus. So a lot of these spaces were considered, and we are coming forward with a recommendation for this addition and renovation, some renovation space on the Rock Springs campus, and some new construction. Are there any other questions that I may answer?
Any other questions? All right, thank you for your comments. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else? Anything else on the community college request? Okay, please proceed.
Mr. Chairman, does that mean we want to not hit line item by line item on the community college projects?
Oh, I think you want to go through them. Yeah.
We want to go through them.
Okay. The next one was page 91, Northwest Community College Student Center. This request is for 25.13 and change, with 55% general fund, 45% other fund. Governor's approval is for 13.9 SIPA and 11.219 and change of other funds.
Mr. Chairman. So the other funds in this instance are, is it like the Jackson Outreach Center, they're to be locally raised?
Mr. Chairman, yes, private revenue.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure you want to hit on this one again, but in sequential order, page 96, Western Wyoming Community College, Rock Springs Nursing Facility. The total request is $10.257 million, 55% general fund of 5.678 and 45% other funds, 4.579, with the governor's recommendation of SIPA funds. The other funds are also private revenue. Page 100, Community College Commission, Northern Wyoming Northern Wyoming Community College District Sheridan Center for Tech and Applied Sciences. The total request is 9.856 million with 55% or 5.456 million of general fund and 4.4 million other funds. The other funds are private revenue. That brings us to the end of the Community College Commission projects.
Mr. Chairman. Suzanne's, or I think it was Sandy was correct. We've seen all these before. I think the last time we saw them, we were concerned about construction costs, and I think we bumped all these up by some percentage. And I think things have only gotten worse in construction costs since then. So that's not for the here and now, but I think it's something certainly to keep in mind, if not on all these projects, at least these projects.
Mr. Chairman, before we go to the university, I just I think the one thing that we've funded, we'll get Dr. Caldwell back here, Dr. Caldwell. So last year we funded to try and continue on with Western Wyoming's infrastructure woes in getting those. Could you just kind of give us an update on how that's going? Or have we got most of that done and cleaned up? Or maybe our good president could come back online and tell us how that process has gone.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, we'll see if we can't get Dr. Dale back on, but I do know that that project is moving forward. I don't know if you know it off the top of your.
Mr. Chairman, Mel Muldrow. We've finished portions of that. We've done the electrical upgrades. We're on the mechanical systems now. I think that just went out I think we just signed the contract for that, I believe. And so that project is, that next level of the project or phase of the project is moving along right now. We still have a lot of work still to do.
Wasn't there some water lines coming into the facility as well that we dealt with, or am I mistaken on that?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, yes, sir, there was. We had some valve issues coming into the facility, but I think those have already been taken care of.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, yes, next up is the University of Wyoming projects. We have Vice President Mai and UW President here with us. Page number 104. The first project is the Law Building Expansion and Renovation, Level 3 Design and Construction. The request was for $25 million. SBC recommended approval of 12.5. The governor recommends denial of this exception request as submitted.
Please proceed. Bill, how are you going?
Doing well, Mr. Chairman. Do you want UW to comment on these
Absolutely.
projects? I think we're
Just
going to
walk
catch
through
the
them.
president a little off guard here if we put him on the spot. So I'll jump in if that's okay. So, Mr. Chairman, you've seen this project obviously numerous times, and this is just a continuation of this one, of the law school redesign and remodel.
So just a couple comments on this. This project was already approved last year for the use of CARES Act dollars, but then when we found out the final rules on the CARES Act, they didn't fit in within that defined purpose. Isn't that accurate?
Mr. Chairman, I believe that's accurate.
And there was also an issue involving one particular teacher and a course that was taught last year. I'm wondering if we have someone that can walk us through what transpired as a result of that complaint or issue, classes being taught, and what that professor, if she's teaching that class now. Can you fill us in with that?
Sure, Mr. Chairman, I can comment on that. So we in fact discussed that in this room a few months ago. Since then, she is teaching this class. Sharon Buccino is the professor, but with a set of guest lecturers that are selected quite broadly across the state. So Jim McGagna, for example, was as one, and actually I spoke to him over the weekend about it. He said it was a very good experience. So I don't have the list, but I could get it for you of the various people that have been brought in to create different perspectives on that course. The course has 5 students in it, as I recall. But I believe that we've done a pretty good job of providing a number of different perspectives in that class.
And my understanding is that course is now over and she's not teaching it. That course will not come back.
That's correct.
Is that correct? So, and I was doing a little bit of homework over the weekend on the UW Law School. It's my understanding that they have more law and natural resource courses by percentage than any other law school in the United States. Basically 20 out of 75 classes are directed simply towards natural resources and energy. Is that correct?
I don't know, but I would believe it would make sense to me that would be true.
And in addition to that, over 2/3 of the faculty are members of the Wyoming State Bar. And the reason is in part because of the clinics that we're trying to bring on campus. and which are basically 8 legal clinics that provide anywhere between $3.5 to $4 million of free legal services to indigent folks around the state of Wyoming. Is that a fair characterization?
I think, I don't have the numbers, but I believe it's true. Certainly it is the intent of those clinics to provide a number of services to the community. And I think they do an incredible job at that.
And just to follow up on that, because there's not insufficient room at UW to perform these clinics, we're not in compliance with the ABA standards. And so we might have the possibility of losing accreditation because of the situation that where we're now teaching these basically in a basement across the street from UW.
I know it's very important, Mr. Chairman, that those clinics gain space so that they can continue to serve the state and in fact to enhance those capabilities.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions about the University of Wyoming Law School expansion for the clinics? All right, let's go on to the next one.
Mr. Chairman, page 108, University of Wyoming War Memorial Stadium West Stand renovation and Corbett Natatorium renovation, level 3 design and construction. The total request is 74.3 million with 51% request for general funds for a total of 37.8 and change general fund request and 36.45 private funds. Governor's recommendation is approval of 37.8 and change from SIPA and 36.5 and change of other funds for the exception request.
So Don, to follow up on an earlier comment, when some of these programs were approved last year, actually still this year, but the last session, there was a inflationary component that went in, I think, for the law school. So that went from 25 million up to 27, in addition to the community colleges. Is that your right? Am I getting that right?
Mr. Chairman, I believe it was $6 million for the university and $12 million for the community colleges.
But, yeah, okay. But so but the overall cost went up just because of the inflationary components.
Yes, speaking back, I believe to your prior comments, all of the community college price tags were increased by 10% by this, by the legislative deliberations on this.
Yeah, okay. Any questions? All right, please proceed.
Mr. Chairman, next project, page 112, University of Wyoming, Jackson Lake, Wyoming, AMK Ranch renovations, level 3 design and construction. The State Building Commission recommended approval of ARP funds. The governor's recommendation is denial of this exception request and will consider funding this proposal with ARPA funds.
Any questions? All right. Any comments? No?
Mr. Chairman, I will point out all of our projects up until you get to, from this point forward, until you get to the lab school piece on UW College of Education, item number 7 and item number 8. All the rest of these were forwarded as ARP requests. So just want you to know those weren't requested by the university as general fund requests.
Yeah, I think that's important to clarify that you were requested by the administration
And Mr.
to
Chairman,
come up with proposals of ARPA expenditures.
correct, Mr. Chairman. In this particular project, so the university has the AMK research facility up at Jackson Lake in Grand Teton Park. That is a federally owned facility. And the reason why the trustees wanted to bring this request to you is we have preliminary approval from the Park Service to construct a dormitory and laboratory facility up there, but we don't have the money to do that. And it has been our trustees and president's point of view that general funds would not be the appropriate mechanism to fund that project up there. However, if we can use federal monies to build on federal land, that might make sense. So that's why you see this big request.
And so the 12 million, was that is that specifically out of where did the number come from?
Mr. Chairman, we've done preliminary cost estimates up there dating back, I think, to 2012, but most recently in 2015 for what it would cost to build on that site that has been allocated by Park Service for us.
Has there been any attempt to, it's Teton County and it's a beautiful place. And there may be possibly interest from folks in Teton County to help assist in this project.
Mr. Chairman, it's a very good point you raise. And our complication with fundraising up there is that we have to do it through the National Parks Foundation that exists up there. They have their own set of priorities. And so we have to be really careful how we try to fundraise in that valley. That's been the biggest complication thus far.
Well, I'm curious about that because if a donor comes up and says, I want to donate $5 million, but it has to go to this project, they're not going to sneeze at it, are they?
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman, you are correct. But as far as UW going in there and attempting to do fundraising through our foundation and so forth, that's been the complication with the foundation up there, the Parks Foundation.
Well, it seems like there ought to be a way around that.
I would be happy to talk to you about it.
All right, go ahead. Next.
Mr. Chairman, next page 116 is the University of Wyoming roundabout at 22nd Street and Willett Street for a total of $800,000. SBC approved the recommendation from ARPA. The governor's recommendation is denial of this exception request as submitted.
So I'm curious about this particular project. Obviously, this is a city street. And so there ought to be some other resources available to put in this roundabout. I mean, just kind of explain go ahead.
Sure, Mr. Chairman. So this is related to the housing project going on over there. And our idea with this roundabout is to mirror what's happening at 15th Street and Willett. So this is at 22nd and Willett, the other major thoroughfare north-south through the city of Laramie. You're right, the city does own that street. The unique part of this is UW owns all four corners. And so in order to construct a roundabout, it would have to be on UW property, primarily the circle part of it, the center part of it. The city agrees that would probably be the best traffic solution on that. I hope I'm not speaking out of line for the city. Our folks speaking with city engineer's office and some of those folks, I think we're all pretty much in agreement that that makes the most sense from a traffic flow standpoint. And we have that 300,000 that's listed separately as private revenue. That is money that the UW trustees have offered up to the city to begin this project.
So what do you anticipate the total cost of the project would be? Because it's probably going to be more than that, I presume.
Mr. Chairman, I think as of right now, that 800,000 would cover it under our current cost estimates.
Okay. Any other questions? Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, page 120, University of Wyoming, Lingle, Laramie, Powell, and Sheridan, Wyoming, College of Ag Research and Extension Centers, Level 3 Design and Construction. Governor's recommendation is approval of 8.632 SIPA funds in lieu of general funds.
So this is what the governor's recommendation was, to switch it from general fund to SIPA.
Correct.
So not using ARPA dollars, or theoretically, right? Any comment on that from the chief executive's office?
Mr. Chairman, for example, we're going to have our conversation with the accounting firm that we selected to help us. The first topic on that is to dive into the infrastructure bill and make sure that we compare that to our CAPCON bill in its entirety so that we don't step over dollars. So that will start off on Thursday, and hopefully we'll have some early information, some early intel, and as we progress, we can get that solidified. But our intent would be to do that exact exercise.
Okay, thank you. Please proceed.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Senator Steinmetz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had a question there. I was just wondering if you have prioritized work in this area and how you selected this to put forward as a project rather than some of the other things at the College of Ag. So just how do you come by this as your project?
Sorry, we're very closely connected to the extension system and to the dean, the College of Agriculture, just about what their priorities are. And I've personally visited a number of these research centers, and while they do a lot of great work there, they are in need of renovation and upgrades of facilities. So just overall, it was judged as a priority.
Thank you. Go ahead, Bill.
Mr. Chairman, I'd tag on maybe one thing to that and say that these projects were submitted clear back in May, and we were trying to anticipate what the rules around the ARP funding were going to be. And so one of the things that we focused on, Senator, was the notion of that research and education component of that part of the funding that had been delineated at that point. So we thought this would fit into that, and that need has been ongoing at those research and extension centers for quite a few years, as I'm sure you're really well aware.
Mr. Chairman,
Please.
if I could get a recap sheet just outlining briefly the work that's proposed at each of these facilities and the cost allocated to each, I'd appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman, we'll respond and lay it out by facility.
And by priority as well. And fund. Okay, please proceed.
Mr. Chairman, page 124, University of Wyoming IT network upgrades for College of Ag Research and Extension Centers, including the previously mentioned centers, as well as AMK Ranch, College of Arts and Science Red Buttes Research Center for a total of $1.95 and change million. The governor's recommendation is to fund it from SIPA for 1.734 and change, and 215,859 private funds for this exception request, and denial of 1.95 million of general funds.
And so this is upgrading in order to do remote learning concepts, or I'm trying to understand your outline.
Yes, it's both about learning and also dealing with the data that come off the instrumentation that we have. For example, the observatory is highly digital. The AMK Ranch has lots of sensors and so on that are there. So it's just about dealing with the data flows as well as remote connections for learning and having remote access to the instruments and so on.
Okay. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, this might be for Kevin. The governor's recommendation is for 215,000 private funds. Did he have any ideas where, if that was to be related to any one particular facility, or how he had hoped? Caught you off guard. I apologize, Kevin. If these private revenues were to go to one particular facility, or how he envisioned any private fundraising to take place on this project.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the general rule of thumb is that if it's other sources, then there's a agency relationship. If it's private sources, then it's being collected by perhaps the community colleges of the University of Wyoming from a private source of revenue. I believe that that's what the intent here is on that.
Mr. Chairman.
Please.
I see, forgive me if this is in there and I just missed it. I see ARP, but I don't know if this is coming out of the ARP capital construction, because there is a bucket of money under ARP specifically designated for broadband capacity and access. Was the intent here that it would go into the broadband category?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, from the university's perspective, yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
So what happened, Mr. Chairman, up at AMK, for example, is the Park Service actually ran a fiber line all the way through Grand Teton, all the way into Yellowstone. And it just happened to cut right past AMK. So we have an opportunity to tap into that.
Okay, please proceed.
Mr. Chairman, page 112. Oh, no, next one. My apologies. Page 128, University of Wyoming College of Education Component Lab School Renovation Level 3 Design and Construction. This is a $2.6 million request from general fund. SBC recommended approval of 1.3 of ARP, but did not recommend approval of any general fund. Governor's recommendation is denial of this exception request as submitted.
Well, he finally denied something else besides the law school. Makes me feel good. Okay, please proceed. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, this project and the next one too are directly related to each other at the lab school that has been discussed multiple times here in this committee, and this is just a continuation of this. The two projects together actually are a representation of the most cost-effective remedy study that was done by Plan One at the direction of school facilities, and Representative Walters may have some to add on to this too, since he was involved in both sides of it.
Any comments?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we've seen this before. If you look at it on the 2.6 million on page 128, that is really adding on the teaching component for the lab school that would not go into the typical design and construction of an elementary school in any other location in the state of Wyoming. And then if you move on to the actual lab school itself on page 132, note that that is being funded or proposed to be funded through the school capital construction account, not through our board general funds. And this would be that number is derived from utilizing the space utilization times the number of students within the school, as you would build any other elementary school on any other site in the state of Wyoming. So that's how those funds were, or those numbers were derived. And the reason for denial is it might just be a little premature in the process at this point.
Go ahead, Representative Larson.
So Representative Walters on that, so that was going to be my question. So we kind of, those schools move up in the process, or are we saying that it's not there yet in as you compile that with all the other schools in the state?
Mr. Chairman, this one was difficult to evaluate in that typical condition and capacity type of evaluation, because it is built into the entire building for the College of Education. It's just a portion of that. It's 2 or 3 floors, a portion of 2 or 3 floors of the College of Education's building. So when they tried to evaluate it from a condition standpoint, it made it more difficult because there were issues that are in good condition because they're part of the other building, say the roof or the windows. But when you try to just delineate out what part of that building is the actual school part, what is the condition? Well, the halls are very narrow. It has multiple stairways. It has ADA compliance issues, and it has a whole plethora of other issues. So it really never, and so in that, saying all of that, it never shows up anywhere on the capacity or condition list because it is not part of that overall evaluation. When they went and did it independently, it puts it right in the top 10 or 12, noting that about 8 of those top 10 or 12 are right here in Albany or in Laramie County that are being worked through kind of separately on the list. So it's right near the top. The other issue is the university is still, I think, deciding where to locate it on campus. Some of the early thoughts of where to locate it are now being utilized for residence halls on campus. So there is still that discussion going on internally at the university. And that's why I say it's just a little premature in the process to move this one forward at this time. Certainly is ready for it from a capacity standpoint, certainly ready for it from a condition standpoint, but it's the locating it and a few other details that certainly need to be worked through before it moves forward.
Okay, appreciate that. Any more comments?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'd tag on a couple of comments to what Representative Walters just said, and that is, this is an odd project in that UW owns the building and all the property, and ACSD 1 runs the school out of there. So UW has, as Representative Walters mentioned, we have replaced windows in the buildings, and this is all in the last 4 or 5 years. I would say we did a major window upgrade in there, and massive security upgrade due to some issues that had existed before. And we are doing that, UW is doing that out of its major maintenance funds because that is a UW building. I just want to clarify that those aren't school cap construction funds going into that. And it is not on any school CapCon list as a result of it being a UW building.
Okay, further questions? Any more information? All right, please proceed. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I think that's our projects. But what I do want to, if you'll indulge me for just a moment.
Absolutely.
I do want to say if the committee can find the time to come over to Laramie, we would love to take you through a few buildings over there that is, that were completed through appropriations that you've made. So we have a science initiative building I think you really ought to see. It is, it's going to come online in February. It's the progress on that building. Every time I go in there, it amazes me how much further along it is. Absolutely stunning building. It really brings, it is going to bring UW sciences and science education a long way. The other one, and some of these probably aren't maybe that interesting to hear about, but when you see them, I assure you, they will be interesting and it will be worth your time. The second one is the West Campus Satellite Energy Plant, which is a supplemental plant to the big power plant you see over there when you come into town. This is actually just north of campus, just north of Lewis Street. It was integrated into the campus architecture, so it really doesn't stand out as some industrial building. It's quite a nice building. You should come look at it and see the capacity that was built into that building and what it's going to do for the university. We're tearing up the majority of the rest of the northwest corner of campus as a result to try to get it tied into that plant, but the efficiencies will be really worth it. And that's also going to accommodate the new housing project. I really would encourage you to come take a look at it. The third one I'd really like you to come see is it was primarily funded by a federal grant. And we went out on South 15th on some property we owned out by the interstate and built a transportation facility out there, again, with federal dollars. All of our buses are moving out there and they'll originate out there now rather than take up, prime real estate right there in the center of town. All of our fleet operations are also moved out there again, just to make it easier to access and to consolidate everything in that one place. And that we're anticipating moving everything into that facility over Christmas. So if you can carve some time out in January, come over, not that I'd, tell you to come over on a game day or whatever, but I imagine we could probably arrange a basketball game as well. If you give us a couple hours, it'd be worth your time to come see it.
If they beat Arizona, we'll come on.
That's on notice.
Mr. Chairman.
Was that?
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
The question for Mr. Mai, somewhat unrelated topic. A couple of years ago, the legislature authorized the university to use financing to build student dorms. And my question is, what happened with that? What's the stage of the student dorm construction? And did the university need to access that financing that the legislature made available, or were you able to do it through private bond market or other funds?
Mr. Chairman, great question. Those funds that were carved out, I believe, from LSRA, Don, is that correct? Those funds have not been accessed. They carry an interest rate that's variable. And what UW did was they went out to the open market this summer and issued bonds. And that's what's going to be used to build those projects over there.
What was the rate on the bonds?
I'm looking at Alex. It was pretty low. Was it sub 2? Pardon? Was it 2.5? There you go.
And what's the total amount of bond issuance?
Alex, 264. 250. 250 million.
And just give us an update. Where are you at?
We are at approval. We are fully into design of those dorms. We are, as you're aware, Lewis Street is also kind of being tied into all of this. So we're working from west to east on Lewis Street with that whole Lewis Street corridor that's been discussed in here umpteen times, but it's taking shape and you should come see that as part of that Science Initiative building tour. The Wyo Hall has been demolished. And speaking of major maintenance questions, just to give you an example of sort of what you're up against or what we're up against, you're in it with us. We had to reroute some aging steam and electric tunnels over there by where Wyo Hall was, which is now a big depression. But that chunk of tunnel, I think, was about 250 feet or maybe 300 feet of tunnel, $17 million to tear that out and redo it. And we have lots of those tunnels on this campus. So that was, a lot of that was done with major maintenance monies. A lot of that work was done. We continue to address those kinds of issues all over campus. But so Wyo Hall's down, that area is ready to go. The other update I'd give you on the overall housing project is the parking garage over at the corner. If you can imagine a block bounded by Grand, Ivinson, 10th and 11th, that was, it used to be the old Ivinson Hospital, probably back when a lot of us were students there. It was a data center. That was all leveled and made into a parking lot several years ago. Now that parking lot is all torn up and piers are being drilled in there to support the new parking structure, and the police facility that will be moved and located in that parking structure.
Okay. Any other questions?
Thanks,
Anything?
Mr. Chairman.
Okay, anything else from UW? Anything else? All right.
Mr. Chairman, page 136.
Thank you for coming over, everybody. Appreciate your time. 136?
Page 136, Wyoming Department of Health, Veterans Home Domiciliary Level 3 Design and Construction. Total of $71 million. The governor's approval is for 24.8 of SIPA funds and 46.1 federal funds.
Any questions on the Veterans Home unit?
Mr. Chairman,
Please.
my question on this, and this is similar to the skilled nursing facility, it takes several years to get these approved for the federal funds. Do we have to put this money aside to show our commitment to the project to be able to apply for the federal dollars? Or can the federal dollars be applied for and known if we are even approved and then come back and put in our share? Just kind of a timing issue is really the whole gist of that question.
Mr. Chairman, Director Johansson couldn't be here today. He does have a policy advisor who may be in the waiting room available to testify, but I do think that bringing this forward now is part of that timing issue. I can't really speak to whether our commitment is required first, but they do think that the approval could take 2 to 3 years. So getting started on design, so more information is available, seems prudent at this point.
Franz, you there?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
Good morning.
Good morning, members of the committee. My name is Franz Fuchs. I'm a policy analyst, Department of Health. I apologize, Director Johansson is indisposed, but hopefully I can answer any questions you have on this. Mr. Chairman, Representative Walters, your question about the timing. The funds are required. We have to have proof of the funds in order to do the application, essentially. So the application would be submitted in April 15th of 2022, and then we need to demonstrate the proof of the funds by August 1st of that year. Unfortunately, due to the way the VA grant priorities are structured and how this project would fall out, we'd likely wait 2 to 3 years for VA matching funds.
So we can
Thank you.
approve the funds, but we don't have to give them to you for a couple of years. Is that right?
Mr. Chairman, I think we need to have the proof of the appropriation to be able to demonstrate that the proof of the funds are there and ready. I'm not sure they'd actually be spent, obviously, in that year, so they may revert, but I think we'd at least need the appropriation.
Okay, any other questions on them? So just so I understand, that they need authorization that we have approved funds to move forward with the project. Then that there's a 2 or 3 year process where they go through to essentially award the 46.1 million. So nothing will start until that happens.
Mr. Chairman, the first part of the timeline is correct. The 2 to 3 years an estimate of how long it's going to take the VA. It's not like it actually has to require them 2 to 3 years to go through the paperwork. It's just based on, they have a list, they rack and stack all the projects, all the VA state homes around the country. And based on the type of project, which is a rehabilitation of a domiciliary level care, this would likely take 2 to 3 years to get approved to work up that list. Unlike the VA nursing home, which was, because we were the only state that didn't have one, was approved much quicker just based on that priority. So it's really just an estimated time frame. We can't say for sure, but that's just sort of our guess on how it falls out in the priority list, if that makes sense. And
has there been a deep dive on any other sources of funds other than general fund or SIPA to come up with the 25 million in terms of other grants, in terms of ARPA dollars, in terms of what are the sources that are out there?
Mr. Chairman, we can probably get you a better answer during our budget hearing, but I would imagine because it is a healthcare facility and we are converting, double occupancy and shared bathroom type spaces to single occupancy rooms as part of the rehab, you could certainly make a COVID related argument as to, this is a necessary upgrade to this facility. I think there's some chance that ARPA dollars could be valuable. But again, that's sort of certainly well above my pay grade. I'd ask Director Johansson to speak to that, and I'm sure the governor's office would obviously have input there.
Yeah, so could you please kind of cover that and any other possible sources when you present? Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman.
Just one second. Reverend Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Franz, can you remind me, this request or this evaluation for the need to redo this domiciliary has been out there since, I want to say 2014, when we had the governor's task force to reevaluate the state health facilities. And we looked at the Life Resource Center, the state hospital, and then this domiciliary. And we shelved that just because of the financial resources of the state. We moved forward with the state hospital and the Life Resource Center and had this out there pending to be done, and this kind of moved to that position. Is my recollection of that accurate?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, yes, we did have that initial master planning done in 2014. However, the estimates that you see today are the result of a level 2 study that was done by Plan 1 in December of 2020. So as part of the whole veterans nursing home project, we also had them do a level 1, level 2 of the entire campus in order to make sure that the projects would, that there'd be a complete master plan for that particular campus with the VA SNF integrated. So those estimates are more recent. The cost estimates are at least a year old, but not 2014 vintage.
Okay, any other questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman.
Please.
No, go ahead with Representative Walters.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think this would be for Suzanne. I noticed that you offer that there should be an annual placeholder of an annual inflator of 7% or approximately 4 million a year to that cost. That is not in the 25 million. That would be additive to, and I'm rounding that number to 25, but that would be additive to that, not, or is that already included as of this printing?
Mr. Chairman, give me just a moment, please. I don't believe it is included at this time.
So what's the percentage ratio of that federal, what's the match required?
Mr. Chairman, 35-65, 35 general fund or SIPA and 46.15 federal fund.
So the question would be, by the time in 2 or 3 years from now, when this is actually approved for construction, we may have had to inflate that 46 million and the 20 to match whatever the actual cost would be.
The actual inflation.
And I guess another thought on that is of our general fund, if we're anticipating that, depending on how the treasurer invests that, if we know it's going to be long-term, then those earnings could possibly help offset that if we designated that now and didn't revert it.
Yeah, we used Lizer or we use some.
Mr. Chairman. And so this may be a question for Franz. Mr. Chairman, so in this discussion about inflation, Franz, when you make the application, is the application initially is at 3565 based on an estimate of 71,000? When this is awarded 2 or 3 years later, assuming that it's awarded then, does the federal government pick up any part of the now increased cost of construction versus the original application? Or is it up to the state to fill in whatever shortage exists?
Mr. Chairman, Chairman Perkins. So just a couple notes. One is we haven't done a level 3 on this project yet, so that we should get an updated or more refined cost estimate from a level 3 study before we do the application. That would be required. But once you submit that number, it's a pretty firm number. There are some percentage allowable differences, and I'd have to defer to construction management on what those are. There's a certain wiggle room in that number, but it's fairly hard once you do your application. I think if we had to wait a long period of time, we'd probably have to resubmit some kind of update, and we'd have to clarify with the VA exactly what that process means. But once you submit the application and assuming the project would get funded, that's a pretty relatively hard number.
Don, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, just for staff's clarification, the State Building Commission approved this at the $58 million level. The narrative suggests 2 years at 4% inflation and an additional 2 years of 7% inflation. So it appeared to us that moving from 58 to 71 incorporates all of those inflationary figures.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Franz, the thing that gets kind of complicated about this project is you've got the military department managing the grant, you've got the SBC managing the construction, and then your department is involved because it's a Department of Health facility. Who is the lead on that grant process? That maybe these issues should be brought to their doorstep so that they're cognizant of that in the grant making process.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Kinski, for the VA nursing home grant, the lead was the chairman, or sorry, Executive Director Steve Kravitsky from the Military Department, myself from the Health Department, and Ryan Scranton from State Construction. I would imagine we'd have a similar project team managing this grant going forward. It would be myself, Ryan, and the current director of the Vets Commission, I would imagine. But I suppose that could change. But we certainly operated as a well-functioning team last time. I don't see why it would be any different this time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Franz, if you could send me a list of all the names involved in it, because the folks back home are going to want to be actively involved as well.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Kinski, yes, sir.
Okay, further questions for Franz or for anybody else? Any further questions? Anything else?
Mr. Chairman, no, we thank you for your time.
Perfect, 12:03. Okay. Don, any housekeeping?
Mr. Chairman, no, the sole agency up for this afternoon is Department of Family Services.
That'll only take about 20 minutes, right? Okay, we will stand in recess till 1 o'clock.